I'm Mike Costello, and I'm here with Dr. Iris Freelander. And today we'd like to talk to you about simplifying your life. It seems that in today's environment, our lives are so complex and so full. And over again in our counseling and work with people, we learn that their lives are becoming even more complex, and the demands of daily life are even greater. And so we'd like to spend this time talking to you about the importance in all aspects of your life of embracing a simple way. And I guess we all need to simplify, don't we, Iris?
Indeed, we do. But it's one of the hardest things to do for some of us. It might not be for you because you always seem to keep a tidy desk at the office. But for me, it's very difficult. For many people, it's very difficult. But it's a mindset like everything else, isn't it?
It is. And the more complex our environment is, the more cluttered our environment is with things and with demands, the more taxed we are from a mental standpoint. And we spend a lot of time talking about the mind-body-spirit connection. And a lack of simplicity or an increased a level of complexity and demand in life really takes away from our mind, body, spirit wellness, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And the experts have shown us, without question, that if we keep our environment tidy, then it's easier for us to keep a calm, simple lifestyle and a mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that that's true. And there's so much information available today. Most people have computers, and they just bring in reams of information. And I read a recent statistic from one of the large groups that every 18 months, information to mankind is doubled. And I find that a very formidable figure and it seems that way because I hear so many people complaining that I can't keep up with the paperwork. I have to go through all those papers that I've collected. And so it's something that we need to do almost daily. And again, I know that many business people, and probably you're one of them, who just is able to throw things out when you know for sure that you're not going to use them, and you know for sure. But so many people are in doubt, and they think, well, I can use it for this purpose or that purpose, or give it to someone else, and someone else will really benefit from that. So we just have to be very firm with ourselves and toss things, but because it can get out of hand. And the first thing we know, every surface in the house is covered with papers, and the rest of the house might look tidy, but with all those papers scattered everywhere, it's very difficult to keep an equilibrium.
Mm-hmm. Very, very difficult. So it's an issue of clutter, just as you said, but also it's an issue of the things that we have and the amount and the number of things that we have. I'm just thinking of somebody that I had a conversation with a while ago who's relatively successful today, and he was mentioning to me that when he started his business and he was a young man, and he and his wife lived very simply. And of course, I need to preface this by saying I'm not at all demeaning or saying that we ought not to be prosperous and we ought not to have good and wonderful things and big homes and other things if we want them. But his story to me was that when he started his business, he and his wife lived quite simply in a little apartment. They had little resources, and he said he had two suits. And he said he had a brown suit and he had a blue suit. And he would go to the office, and each day he would alternate, and he was very embarrassed by the fact that that's all he had. But he would alternate ties, and he tried to make the best of the fact that he had a blue suit and he had a brown suit. But he said as his business became more prosperous and as he moved through life, he said, made a comment, and he said, now my closet is full of Italy. And he said, I have to spend an hour every night planning what I'm going to wear tomorrow. And so that kind of consumption of our resources and of our time, and the reality that prosperity, as good as it is and as wonderful as it is, and of course in our religious center and in our counseling practices, you and I both advocate prosperity and abundance for people. And so we're not at all talking about living a life of poverty. But as we live an abundant life, and as we are able to have the resources that fulfill our desires in this worldly life, we really need to look at what we have and minimize the things that we have and have what we need that makes sense and what is useful to us, and simplify our lives.
Yes, and another way we can simplify is putting things back in their place, having a place for everything. And I know people who look for their keys every day they're ready to leave the house. They can't find their keys, and they're here and there and everywhere. Well, if they would just have one place to hang those keys when they arrive in their home, then they would find them there when they leave, and it would simplify a great deal. And that's just one example of how we can simplify by having a place to put things, regardless of how the size of our home, we can spend hours just looking, and it's such a waste of time and waste of energy that it would just behoove us to simplify and look over our lives and see where we can. And it's just like phone calls. Sometimes we can simplify our phone calls by just not talking a really long time and then having time left over to do the necessary thing.
And it's true that we all have the same 24 hours in a day, and how we use those hours is really up to us. And whether we're good stewards of our time or bad stewards, and sometimes we make more agreements in life, or agree to do more in life than we ought to. And it is a matter of setting priorities, deciding what's of value to each individual in their life and how it is they want to spend their time. And it's very important that we simplify our schedule so that we're able to put our time and our effort in those areas that are the most beneficial to us. And I think one of the big areas that so many people miss today is family life. And we spend a lot of time talking as a nation and in churches and organizations about the value of the family. And yet, because of the complexity of our schedules and our time, our families become so busy, and everyone tries to accommodate everyone else. And as a consequence, we become less cohesive because there are more activities outside the home. And that's not to say at all that those are bad, but that the family itself doesn't have the ability to enjoy one another, to share with one another, to support one another, to nurture and empower one another because of the fact that their lives are so busy. And I think of all of those who are listening, and those of us who have dealt with children and the families that we work with that have children, and how those children are so busy today. And the parents are often taking the children and supporting the children in their outside activities, so the home life suffers. And again, we're talking about a balance. We're not talking about a throwback to 1955 where we have a Leave It to Beaver environment, because that had some unhealthy aspects as well. But we are talking about how it is we can function as families and how we can function in relationships with each other, whether we spend adequate time with each other, and even for those that are in a simple relationship with only two people, or others that are by themselves completely, how they spend time in their home life, in their private life, in their life, their spiritual life, whether there's adequate time for all of those things.
Exactly. And Dr. John Rosemond he's a newspaper columnist and a family doctor. And he has wonderful information, and he and his wife raised two children, so he uses them as an example of the bad things they ought not to have done and the good things that they did correctly. And he has been writing recently about, everyone's talking about the breakdown of our country, the breakdown of the family life, the breakdown of our everything. So he's saying that it would go a long way if everyone would schedule meals together. And he didn't say, as you just said, you can't perhaps plan all the dinners together, but plan specific ones and honor that time and not turn on the TV. And I think he's the one who gave information about the child who was thinking of committing suicide, and it was because his father never paid any attention to him and then even though they had meals together, the father was always reading something during the meal, so the child just felt very rejected and very left out. And that's very easy for children to feel that way, and they act up just to get attention. So it's a wonderful thing if we just plan those times together and know that we're going to honor them, and have our children honor them too, and they can work their schedules around it.
And the interaction that we have with other people. We were talking recently with a group about the fact that we have missed that kind of connectiveness that we used to have with friends. And I was talking with a group of people about when was the last time you were invited to a dinner party? And it was a short time ago, a decade ago, it was common practice for people to go to other people's homes and to enjoy a meal or to go to a ball game or do things. And it's not to say that those things don't happen, but they happen less and less. And they happen less in a conscious way. They more often happen out of obligation or because one feels that they have to do it, where we're talking about simplifying our lives. So we're doing things with other people, we're interacting with family, with friends, with community, with our circle of personal friends, and in our work environment, and with the larger community, on planned and scheduled events and opportunities. And one of the important things I think that we need to understand is that we're all different. And some people can operate with a very, very different schedule than other people can. You and I were just talking before the program about my schedule, and I stay very, very busy. But I'm not stressed because the way that I am busy and the things that I do, I enjoy thoroughly. And so I'm able to move through them easily. But when we're not enjoying the events of our lives, when we're not enjoying the things that we're doing, that's when it becomes stressful. That's when we become tired, and that's when we get farther behind. The other thing that we need to do in our schedules is to be able to tell people what we can do and what we can't do. And I'm very good at that. I have no problem telling someone I can't make this or I can't do that. And I think we need to be honest about that with people. But there are people who need much more quiet time. And I think those people need to not have these full schedules and great demands, and need to understand that they need the time that they need in order to center themselves. And in the second half of the program, we'll talk, as we always do, about the spiritual aspects of centering and the importance of how it is that our spiritual life can add balance to our very busy life that we have in daily life.
Yes, and it's just a wonderful thing if we're able to get our schedules worked out, so we do have free time and we do simplify. And I would just encourage our listeners to make up a schedule of what they really want, and follow that schedule, because we do something with our time, so we can follow our own schedule and be much happier with it.
And if we do that, then we're able to plan.
Yes.
And then we're able to judge whether we're on schedule or off schedule. And again, we're not talking about a rigid schedule, but we begin to relieve ourselves of some of the stress. We begin to relieve ourselves of some of the burdens of life, and we begin to relieve ourselves of the things that draw our strength out of us, and our activities and our daily life can then empower us because we are enthusiastic about our lives. We're enthusiastic about what we're doing, who we're with, what we're involved in, where we're working, what our circle of friends is, and then life becomes a positive experience and an affirmative experience, and not an experience where we feel we're out of control and we have nothing to say. In fact, we do have a lot to say, but so many of us give up our lives to circumstance and situation.
And on that basis, we offer spiritual and emotional nutriment to the people around us, not only our spouses and children, but everyone around us. And that's what life is supposed to be like, isn't it?
We're supposed to support each other. And again, those who are able to be more supportive need to support more people. And we need to understand that some people will require more support and will require help in simplifying their lives and kind of decomplexing what we do.
Yes. Well, it's certainly a happier life when people go as a couple. But one thing about going as a single, we can schedule our own time more fully, and then there's less stress involved there. So those people who do have others in the family that they have to consider, they just have to do that.
And we need to be aware of the fact that we're making choices, and we're making choices always in our life. Every one of us makes a choice as to how we're going to spend our time. We make a choice as to how we're going to feel about circumstances, situations. We make a choice about every aspect of our life, and sometimes, very often, we make those choices unconsciously. And what we talk to people about is making a conscious awareness, or being consciously aware of the choices that are being made, and being accountable and responsible for the choices that we make.
Yes, and to realize that we do have choices, that every person has 24 hours a day to choose how they want to spend that time. So if they will have a schedule made up of their own making, and then follow that schedule, it's easy very often.
It's easy, and it makes life a lot more enjoyable for everyone involved, but it's not always that easy.
No, it isn't that easy, but again, it's a mindset. And someone said people are as happy as they make up their minds to be. People are as busy as they make up their minds to be, as hectic, as stressed. It's just taking deep breaths and getting the second wind, and it's just, again, it's a mindset. And if our mind says we're stressed, then we'll be stressed. If our mind says we're calm, we'll be calm.
Yes. As we say so often, we live in our minds and not in the world. We'd like to pause at this point in the program and offer you the opportunity to receive some literature so that you can continue in your own home to study the ideas and concepts that we're sharing with you.
We would like to offer you the opportunity to receive one of these free booklets to further your understanding of the New Thought message of confident living. Each month, we will feature a different booklet, which will be mailed to you free and postage paid. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California, 90807, and we will rush this month's selection to you. Dr. Costello and Dr. Freelander always welcome your questions, comments, and prayer requests. Please address your requests to P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California, 90807. Mike and Iris would like to extend a cordial invitation for you to join them this Sunday morning at 11 a.m. for our weekly celebration service at the beautiful Seaport Marina Hotel at the corner of Pacific Coast Highway and 2nd Street, adjacent to the Marina Pacifica and Marketplace shopping centers. You will experience the musical talents of Ms. Denise Dumeyer. There will be a guided meditation, prayers, spirited music, and a dynamic, life-changing New Thought message. Please join us this Sunday. You will be warmly welcomed into the company of like-minded, positive, and uplifting people. And remember, whatever your dream, whatever your vision, you can attain it through confident living.
Before the break, we were talking about how we can simplify our lives and how important it is to simplify our way of thinking. And just before the break, you were talking about the fact that it's really up to us. And the way that we think and the way that we respond to circumstances and situations determines the quality of our life. And so in the second half of the program, I think we'd like to share with our viewers how it is that they can simplify not so much the physical aspect, although we'll touch on that, but how we can simplify the clutter that exists in our minds. And that's the real challenge to simplify, isn't it?
Yes, it's a challenge because those who are busiest and those who have more clutter think they don't have time enough and think they have to clutter. So it's, again, they just have to change their mind on that, in that way of thinking. But we need to take time, the first thing every morning, to just center ourselves. And some people take a long meditation, and some a short meditation, and some just a time of, you couldn't quite call it meditation, but it's a time of quiet. And so if we do take that time, I think it's much easier to stay centered throughout the day, don't you?
Absolutely. All of us have such demands during the day, and I think it's great to have these times of refreshment where we come apart. And one of the things we always say in this program is we're not talking about anybody changing their religion or we're not talking about anybody abandoning their faith tradition. We're talking about the fact that anybody and everybody, regardless of their background or regardless of their faith or lack thereof, has the ability to come apart and be quiet and to have some quiet time of reflection. And certainly beginning the day that way is wonderful, and ending the day is that way wonderful, and maybe another time during the day if we're able to. But it's important to set aside the time, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And if we do set aside that time and we become calm and centered, then it helps us to plan our day. It helps us to remember the things we want to take with us when we leave the house and the things we want to take from one room to another, because that's what causes so much confusion. It's not being collected, that we forget things and we have to go back for things, and and then we get our mind cluttered, and then we get off to a bad start. So if we just do that, it makes a big difference. And also to keep a list, I think, is very good, to make up a list the night before. I remember years ago when I worked in a business office, the vice president of the company said to me, "You always seem to be collecting, you know what you're doing throughout the day, and you don't seem to be harassed or stressed out." And so I had to think about what made the difference. And it was, and so we devised that he would make a list the night before of all the things he wanted to do the next day, and then check those off. And then he would add to that list throughout the day, if that were the case. But I think that really helps a great deal. And some people can keep things clear in their mind, and they can remember. And then they don't need a list, but others do need lists.
Mhm. And this issue that you touched on about confusion, I think, is an important one, because I talk to people and counsel with a lot of people, as you do as well. And we both, I'm sure, find that so many times people, especially today, because of the complexity of what's going on in the world and concerns and finances and relationships and jobs and all of the rest of it, that so many people of all ages, it doesn't have to do with older people, we sometimes think of it only in terms of older people, but people will come and they'll say, my life is so I seem to feel so confused. And especially when a relationship is at an end, or someone's faced with a financial challenge, or so often today we see people who've lost jobs and have very bleak futures ahead of them, at least in their sight and in their vision. So this issue of confusion is just paralyzing, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And also, it's paralyzing to people to dread the future and to not know what the future holds, and we never know what the future holds. And one way we can do that is make it an adventure, and that sounds very simplistic, and some people might think, well, how dare she say something so stupid? But actually, it is. That's true.
Life is an adventure,
Yes.
and again, it's a choice, and we come back to our individual choice. The importance of meditation or a spiritual dimension to life is so important, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And this is one of the most important things to me that we can ever do. And as I've counseled and as I worked with different groups, it shows so remarkably well how people's lives are changed. And it's just because they're centering themselves, and we all believe in the divine, I'm sure. There might be some people who think they don't, but I can't imagine anyone going through life not having some belief in a divine creator source. And so it wouldn't matter what our religion is, as long as we have that connection. And then if we maintain that connection, then we don't feel so alone. And I feel sorry for a lot of people today, and sometimes myself included. Those of us who live alone. Well, we don't feel lonely, but we feel sometimes so alone. And I know I counseled someone this week who had to work through that, and she was saying that I just feel so alone. And we talked about being lonely, and she said, no, it's not that I'm lonely. I feel so alone. And I think that's part of the isolation we put ourselves into in our society today. We live in nice homes and everyone has a home, and so then we isolate ourselves. And sometimes we isolate ourselves through fear, regardless of what area we live in or what the conditions are around us. A lot of people are just fearful, and so they isolate themselves, and then they feel so alone. But then they feel alone when someone in the family has died, and they feel alone at various times. So again, I think the things we're saying would help if people would just regroup their own life and look at it objectively and pretend they're counseling another person, and then they could see more clearly what they might do differently and how they might think differently. But again, if we have that connection with divine creator source, that to me is the first step.
And to understand that the fear and the concerns and that the negative aspects of life are really cluttering up our way of thinking.
Yes.
And so is the same as in our physical life, where we have clutter in our lives and we need to simplify. We need to declutter and we need to simplify our way of thinking. And a way of simplifying our way of thinking is always understanding and realizing that the presence and power of the divine, whatever we choose to call that or whatever we believe it to be, that the presence of the divine is always accessible to us and is always willing and ready to guide us and direct us. If we would just step out of the situation of our own confusion, and we would come into a quiet place, and we would be open to be guided and directed in new and different ways. And in order to do that, we have to put aside the confusion and put aside the fear and put aside all of the negative aspects of our life, and we have to move into a place of peace, into that habitation of peace. And we can do that in mind. And when we do that, we center ourselves, and it's not prayer, it's not meditation, it's a prelude to meditation, but that opens us to centering ourselves and being able to not be fearful, not be complex, not be cluttered, and to have a mind that is able to be guided and directed in ways that we don't know or understand, but the way will be open to us.
Yes, and another important aspect of our lives, of simplifying our lives, is the way we eat. Some people eat the wrong foods, and it gets them hyper or it gets them depressed. And too much sugar, for example, can do both of those two things. It can make people either hyper or depressed. And so we need to guard against eating improperly. And if we just give some thought to it and eat the way we know that we should, it makes a big difference. And I've seen people change their diet and change their whole mindset. And they lose that feeling of fearfulness, or they lose the feeling of whatever the negativity is plaguing them, then they lose that just because they've changed their diet. Because what we take into our bodies is what we are.
Absolutely. What we take into our bodies is what we are, and what we take into our minds is what we are. And we take in nutriment in both ways.
Exactly.
And we allow the external influences of life to enter our minds, and we allow too much food and too many other things often to become addictions that are ways of coping. And the real way of coping is to take responsibility for our lives, to center ourselves in the presence of something beyond ourselves, and to step out of the negative aspects of life into the positive realities of who and what we are. And it sounds simple, and it is simple, but it's sometimes complex to make a reality in our life. Dr. Freelander and I have been sharing with you today ideas and concepts that we hope have been useful to you, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
We would like to offer you the opportunity to receive one of these free booklets to further your understanding of the New Thought message of confident living. Each month we will feature a different booklet, which will be mailed to you free and postage paid. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California 90807, and we will rush this month's selection to you. Dr. Costello and Dr. Freelander always welcome your questions, comments, and prayer requests. Please address your requests to P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California 90807. Mike and Iris would like to extend a cordial invitation for you to join them this Sunday morning at 11 a.m. for our weekly celebration service at the beautiful Seaport Marina Hotel at the corner of Pacific Coast Highway and 2nd Street, adjacent to the Marina Pacifica and Marketplace shopping centers. You will experience the musical talents of Ms. Denise Dumeyer. There will be a guided meditation, prayers, spirited music, and a dynamic, life-changing New Thought message. Please join us this Sunday. You will be warmly welcomed into the company of like-minded, positive, and uplifting people. And remember, whatever your dream, whatever your vision, you can attain it through confident living.